This video is all about Star Trek, and nothing to do with Star Trek. It's a Star Trek apologetic, but it's really more about human ingenuity, curiosity, and our ability to be more and better. It's about the ideals behind Star Trek, the impact they've had, and our need to revive those ideals now more than ever. This meme is making the rounds. "Captain, we can't hold this speed for much longer," yelled Scotty from the engine room, a common occurrence in the original series. "Just turn the engines off then. We can continue at this speed forever, unless affected by an outside force. That's how space works, Scotty," retorts Kirk, breaking the fourth wall and smugly explaining to the reader a perceived flaw in this frequent plot device, that in real life a spaceship would maintain its speed forever unless acted on by outside forces. This is based on Newton's first law of motion. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion, and objects at rest tend to stay at rest unless an outside force acts upon them. While presented as an obvious fact which Star Trek is violating for dramatic purposes, when Newton published his Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica in 1687, the idea that an object would keep moving forever unless something stopped it was revolutionary and totally counterintuitive. Though 333 years later Newton's laws represent the ultimate orthodoxy in physics, they were revolutionary at the time. Kirk's comment makes sense when the Enterprise is moving under impulse power. An impulse is a force applied to an object for some time. In space, friction is minimal, though not absent, so the Enterprise would maintain speed pretty well without needing much additional help. At warp drive, however, something different is going on. The Enterprise is crossing distances faster than light does, and it turns out you can't just push something hard enough to make that happen. Einstein predicted, and it was later shown, that mass increases with speed. With the speed of light as the limit, it would take an infinite energy to push an object from sublight to faster than light speeds. So how is warp supposed to work? Is it just fantasy to drive plot? Star Trek's writers and their scientific consultants used the idea of a warp bubble, an area of spacetime around a spaceship that was distorted, allowing it to compress and expand spacetime itself, sidestepping the limitations on acceleration by bending spacetime instead of just pushing the ship. But is warp drive feasible? Star Trek is known for its hand-wavy science, explaining impossibilities through creative pseudoscience. Among Trekkers, though, it's also known for coming up with or promoting ideas that inspire people to go into science and engineering, people who've often gone on to make major breakthroughs that make Star Trek world a little more real. In 1994, Miguel Alcubierre proposed a compelling approach to creating distortions in spacetime of the sort needed for warp travel. The math works and is consistent with a lot of current physics, but has a few key issues. One of them is that it requires a kind of exotic matter that's theoretically possible but has never been observed, and that most physicists don't think actually exists. Another is that it would take mind-boggling amounts of energy to work. Star Trek's writers decided warp drive would take vast energy to run, so they powered the ship on the most efficient energy source we know of, the direct conversion of matter and antimatter to energy via annihilation. This brings us back to the meme. The meme patronizingly explains outdated physics, mocking a show that, while prone to awful pseudoscience at times, has often been closer to the mark on what's scientifically possible than the beliefs of its time, or even now, some 50 years later. And that takes me to my other theme. I've been a Trekker since my great-aunt Grace got me excited about it when I was a kid. And it's never been about phasers, space battles, or Kirk punching bad guys. While Star Trek's writers have often had problematic takes on race, sex, class colonialism, and more, what speaks to me and to so many others is the idea that we can do better. Not just in terms of scientific innovation, but in terms of what we allow ourselves as individuals and a species to be. At the time, the idea of an elite top-level crew of a starship, including the diversity Star Trek did, and being on a mission of exploration, not for exploitation, was for America groundbreaking. Star Trek imagines a world where through scientific advancement there is enough for all, and humanity has come together. With our basic needs met, it envisions us moving not only beyond needs-based conflict, but beyond the ignorance and greed that lock us in conflict no matter how secure we are or how much we have. On the whole, we treat these ideas with the same cynicism with which the meme author smugly explains Newtonian physics. Silly people, that's just not the way the world is. We fall back on a Malthusian, centuries-old view of human possibility that ignores so much that we've learned, from physics to psychology, civic design to cognitive bias. We have the tools to do better. And have had them for some time. It takes a while for our culture to catch up to the leading edge of understanding and possibility that we've discovered. But now's the time. From systemic racism to economic systems based on maintaining increasingly ludicrous imbalances in wealth, we can do better. We really do know how, and we have to. While it's going to take hard work, courage, ingenuity, and change, it's time for a reawakening to our potential, a reimagining of how society can be, and a rebirth as individuals and as a whole. This is exactly the right kind of challenge to set ourselves with the most rewarding results possible.